Upbeat earnings keep stock markets afloat, dollar mixed. Following a mixed start to the session at the beginning of the week, Wall Street stocks closed at fresh record highs on Monday as investors prepared for fresh quarterly earnings. The Nasdaq Composite rallied nearly 1%, buoyed by a jump in Tesla stocks. As the company's shares rose over 12.5%, the company's market cap surpassed $1 trillion after Morgan Stanley hiked its price target on the shares to $1,200 from $900, while Hertz said it would order 100,000 Tesla vehicles. On Tuesday, U.S. stocks climbed to fresh all-time highs overnight, but backed slightly off those peaks by the close. Investors were digesting upbeat corporate earnings along with solid economic data. U.S. consumer confidence rose in October due to improving labor market shortages and prospects, while new home sales jumped 14% to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 800,000 units last month. On the negative side, Facebook missed estimates for revenue and monthly active users in the third quarter. Following the report, the company's stocks fell over 5% to close nearly 4% lower. Asian stock markets were mostly lower on Wednesday as the Australian inflation data fueled concerns over the mounting price pressure globally. The CPI rose by 0.7% to 2.1% in the third quarter, while fuel costs jumped 7.1%. The S&P ASX 200 in Sydney finished 0.07% higher. The Shanghai Composite lost nearly 1%, while the Japanese Nikkei 225 shed less than 0.1%. In Europe, equities finished with losses amid mixed corporate earnings. The pan-European Euro Stoxx 600 index was lower by 0.36%. On the data front, the Eurozone September M3 money supply came in at 7.4% higher versus the 7.5% rise year-on-year expected. Deutsche Bank stocks fell nearly 5% after German leader reported a fall in revenues at its investment banking unit during the third quarter. Investment banking revenue declined 6% in the third quarter from a year earlier, while fixed income and currency trading saw net revenue drop by 12%. On the positive side, the bank said its net profit attributable to shareholders was 194 million euros, compared with a profit of 182 million euros a year earlier. Meanwhile, UBS beat analyst expectations in the third quarter, reporting net profit attributable to shareholders of $2.3 billion. The Swiss bank stocks gained over 2% in early deals. Overnight, Wall Street indexes were mostly lower, retreating from records set just the previous day, with the S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average losing 0.5% and 0.7% respectively. At that, the S&P 500 remains on course for its biggest monthly advance in nearly a year. Bucking the trend, the tech-heavy Nasdaq finished barely in the green, with Alphabet and Amazon rallying. McDonald's reported a rise in its quarterly sales in the United States due to higher prices. The company's shares jumped nearly 6.5% following the release. In currencies, the dollar has been mixed since the beginning of the week, mostly advancing versus the risk-sensitive counterparts while easing slightly versus the safe-haven Japanese yen. In general, the greenback is buoyed by the rebound in U.S. Treasury yields. On the data front, the preliminary estimate of the September goods trade balance posted a deficit of $96.3 billion, larger than the previous $89.4 billion. The USD index remains relatively steady on Thursday while staying below the 94.00 figure. Following a strong rejection from the 1.1670 area on Monday, the Euro-USD has been struggling to regain the upside bias these days, flirting with the 20 DMA and the 1.1600 figure. Traders are now bracing for the European Central Bank monetary policy decision due later today. The central bank is widely expected to maintain its dovish stance. Meanwhile, Brent crude oil futures fell sharply on Wednesday as the government report showed a bigger than expected crude oil inventory build. According to U.S. Energy Information Administration, crude oil inventories rose by 4.3 million barrels last week, more than the expected 1.9 million barrels gain. On the positive side, gasoline stocks dropped by 2 million barrels to levels not seen in nearly 4 years. Also, the futures were pressured by reports after Iran and the European Union agreed to restart negotiations on a revival of the nuclear accord before the end of next month. Brent crude extended losses to $81.60 early on Thursday before erasing losses to settle at around $83 ahead of the opening bell in Europe. That is all for today. Thank you for watching. Please click subscribe to always be in touch with the latest market news.